Hey guys, this is Mr. Lupton. I hope you did well on the first activity this week, which was making the connection between what kind of data is best represented by different types of graphs. We're focusing on three of those types of graphs that you learned about. I think you would have realized that from the review and quiz activity that you did. But again, we're focusing on bar graphs, circle, or also called pie graphs, as well as line graphs. So the activity that you have for this week is actually asking you to create each one of these types of graphs in Google Sheets. So the activity today, again, has three parts to it. You can see down here we have activity 1, activity 2, and activity 3. So I'm going to go back to activity 1 here for a second so that we can start from the get-go here. So here's what I want to do first. We're just going to walk through how to do some formatting to, again, just like we've been doing before, make the information in our spreadsheet easier to read. And then we're going to create a graph, not a table. So we're going to create a graph that will visually represent data. First thing it wants us to do is make all the row and column headings bold. So I'm going to highlight my cells range B1 to G1, and I'm going to bold that. And then I'm going to do the same thing for my cell A2, which is I only have one row of data really in this. And then I want to add borders around everything except for the footnote. So again, range A1 to G2, and add my borders, all borders. And then lastly, I want to format the column width so that all content is visible. So I'm actually going to highlight the whole column B through G and double click that to cause that to adjust a little bit. Then I'll shift my column B over here. I may even shift my column A a little bit. Notice if I do my double click in column A, it's going to make it huge because I have this content down here below. So just be careful with that as you're adjusting the sizes this week. The trick that we use is a good trick, but it can be tricky sometimes if you have other information in your spreadsheet. All right, so we've done the three formatting tasks, and now we're going to go ahead and create the graph. So to create the graph, we want to highlight all of our information, and then we're going to go to Insert, Chart. So chart and graph are used interchangeably here. And you'll notice right away, one of the things that Google Sheets does is it kind of tries to predict what type of graph that you want based on the data that it sees there. And interestingly enough, Google Sheets is actually really good at this. I'm going to push this up again so that we can see more of the screen. But if we look at our data, then we see that we have the number of active users for 6 of the more popular communication apps that exist. And so all of these amounts are in numbers of millions of users. So WhatsApp has 2 billion users around the world versus 1.3 billion for Facebook Messenger, about 1.2 roughly for WeChat, and 731 million, 400 million, and 398 million for the last 3 apps respectively. So right away, we see that we get this wonderful graph, and it's a really great start to what we want to have. I'm going to actually try to slide this down here and then scroll down on my page a little bit so we can see it. And this is a good start. We could leave it like this if we wanted to, but I want to show you guys some of the things that we can do to actually customize this information. So I'm going to go over here to my chart editor, and I'm going to go to the Customize tab. And then I'm going to go to the chart axes and titles first. And it's right now saying that the title of the chart is active users. And that's not exactly what the chart is showing. The chart is actually showing number of users of popular messaging apps. We want to change that to make that correct, and we'll make it bold as well. So from there, we can go to the different series that we have. So this is the the data groups that we want to work with. And so active users is fine. And then we could look at just as easily, again, scrolling down here to our vertical axis, look at look at our apps. So really everything there is fine. Really the only thing that I would say is kind of left to do, it'd be really nice if our graph would show some numbers here. So I want to go to series and I'm going to click on data labels. And just like that, it nice and easy gives me some numbers here to go with each of my messaging apps. So just like that, we added a graph to visually represent this data. This makes it very easy to see, oh my gosh, WhatsApp has a lot more users than everybody else. Even if you combine Facebook Messenger and QQ Mobile, put those graphs on top of each other, they'd barely be above WhatsApp. So I think this is a really good example of how graphs can help us see the impact of data better than just looking at numbers, although numbers can do that too. But most of us tend to be more visual in our learning style, and so this actually helps. So that's all for activity number 1. I'm going to go ahead and click over here to activity number 2. And we have the same 3 formatting tasks. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that quickly because, again, I know you guys at this point should be able to handle doing this without too much additional instruction. We've done it enough times now that you can. Although certainly you can watch and see what I'm doing to know how to do this as well. Or if you would rather, you just go back and look at any of the previous things that we've done. Okay. So at this point, let's see here. Here we go. That looks pretty good to me. Nice and easy to see everything. And so this time, when we look at our data, we notice that we are looking at active WeChat users. So we're still looking at this WeChat messaging app. And we're looking at how the number of active users have changed from year to year, from the year 2011 to the year 2019. So they went from 50 users in 2011. It's been a steady incline all the way to where we are today with about 1.2 billion total users. So again, to get a graph that represents this, and again, we want this to say graph, not table, highlight all of the data. I'm going to bring down my menu here so I can choose Insert Chart. And again, we have Google Sheets kind of guessing as to what the data should be. But of course, this time, what we know, what you guys have learned this week, is that when we have data that goes over a time period, we don't want a bar graph. We want to use what's called a line graph. So we're going to customize this. And where we want to go back to customize. We want chart style. That wasn't shown there at first. And nope, I apologize. It does need to be in setup. And we're going to use, again, we have some options here for different things they can show us. But they give a suggested one of line graph. So again, in the chart editor, go to setup and go to line graph. And we have this graph. And one of the weird things that this did when we looked at this is it kind of cut off our 2011 and 2019. So that is really weird that it defaulted that way. So we're going to do some customization to this to kind of fix that. Again, we're going to come up here, change the chart title. We'll call this yearly change active WeChat users. And that's really the only thing we want to do here, make that bold. I like to make those titles bold. And then for our series, if you want to change the line color, you can. I tend to like the blue, but if you prefer a red line or a purple line, you can make the line color whatever you want. Have fun with that, play with that. Again, I kind of like the blue personally. And again, I want to add some data labels here, which now this is a little bit nicer because at least I get to see where the data labels are for each year, even though they're not really showing me every year yet. So we're going to continue to work on that and fix that. For those of you guys that have learned this in a science class or a math class before, a nice little tool that we can do here is throw a trend line on. That's a typical algebra y equals mx plus b line that we can use to kind of figure out the trend of this. So if you guys are familiar with that particular task that's often used in science and math classes, you have that now. We're going to go to the horizontal axis. This is the one that goes left to right. It's really the one that we have the issues with right now. And what we're going to do first is I want to click this box that says treat labels as text. And by doing that, it's going to show up with all my years down here at the bottom and give me the amounts for all my years except for 2019. And so the issue that we have going on here with 2019 is that our high end of our y-axis is not big enough. So what I need to do is minimize horizontal axis and go to the vertical axis. And it gives me a chance to put in minimum value and maximum value. So I'm just going to go ahead and make a bigger maximum value here, which when I do that, it now gives me a much better view of this data, including the point at 2019. So if you don't like the fact that there's very few numbers over here, you can change that in this section as well. But for me, I'm kind of okay with it. Again, we can change this to be kind of whatever we want by 100, 1,000. Just leave it as default because I think that's kind of the best format of all of this. Because again, we have the data labels, so the y-axis numbers tend to be a little bit less important when we can see those numbers and visually see how the change is going. So again, we finished the second one. So let's go ahead and go on to activity number 3. And again, at the beginning of this activity, we just have some basic stuff that we want to do. Make all of our headings bold. Our borders around everything on the table. And then change up a little bit the size of our columns. So I'm going to fix my B, and again, makes everything kind of nice and easy to read for me. So formatting done, it is time to create the graph that is going to go in here. So again, to do that, select all of our data, go to insert, go to chart. And again, it's going to try to guess what the graph should look like. And really, again, we want to look at this and see what the best thing is here. So water usage. This is water usage as a percentage of total use. So we see these are the percentage of use of water based on these factors. And when we add these up, do a quick sum to see if this is right. When we add these up, these numbers should basically equal 100, and 99.9 is basically 100. So that means that this is a graph that should be showing us how each of these pieces make up the whole. So a bar graph is not the right graph for that. So we want to change this graph. So I'm going to go to my chart style here. And again, go to setup, scroll all the way up, change it from a column chart to either we call this a circle graph or a pie chart, pie graph. I tend to use the term pie chart. Google Sheets tends to use the term pie chart, but it can also be called a circle graph. And so we see here that this has done a pretty good job for us in the basic setup. I like the way that it's organized, so we can definitely do something with that. So what I will do though, just as some minor changes here, I do want to, let's see, go to my setup here. Yeah, I'm missing my thing. Oh, there we go. There's my chart titles. It's usually at the top. Water usage is pretty good actually. I don't really need to change that, so I'll just make it bold like I like to do. And then we'll minimize that. We can go look at the legend, and right now the legend is basically these little pieces that are coming off the graph. I tend to like that off to the side with the colors connected to it, which again, visually, I think this is easier for people to look at, but what's missing is having the percentages show up here. So what we want to do is, again, kind of go in and add those percentages back to this. And those are going to be, I hope, my data labels here, slice label, there we go. And we'll put it as percentage, which is what we're showing here. So in the pie chart drop down, we just add the slice label to be percentage. And now we have really the best of both worlds. The colors telling us where the information is, and then the numbers put in right here. So hopefully it was just that easy, right? All this is really understanding how to grab the data that we're looking at, picking out the right chart, and then just being able to look around and find the right changes and features to make the chart look the way that we want it to look, to make it the most readable and easy to view for other people. So there's a lot of different opinions about what's most readable. I'm not going to be too worried about that, but what I really want you guys to be able to do is be able to look at a data set like we have here, pick out the right kind of graph for that data set, and create that graph with a title and the necessary information for the user to be able to look just at the graph, not even at the data set, but just at the graph, to make sure that they have all the information there they need. So we can see that with water usage. We have the types here and the percentages here. We also have that with the yearly change in active WeChat users, with the years here and the total number as it goes up here. And then finally, we have this with the number of users of popular messaging apps, with the total active users here and the app names here at the bottom. And then, of course, the values of these bars in our graph. So that's what we're going for. That really is the big idea here. Let's create something that people can see and use to make this really good. So thanks, guys, for your time. I hope you did well with this. If you need any help, you guys know how to get in touch with me. Get in touch and we'll make it work. All right, guys, take care.